James, there was this huge expose on carte blanche this weekend on Ingula, or was it an expose?
I think it was the first time it's been documented that well on TV. That it made for good viewing, but it wasn't exactly the first time. I've written about it in the book, in my book on Eskom, the blackout, the Eskom crisis, came out last year. So I think it was newsworthy, definitely, and yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily everything was brand new. The issues around Ingula has been ongoing for some time.
So what was the key point that you took out of that expose, would you say?
The massive point which I would argue is quite new and newsworthy is just the latest estimate of total cost for Ingula, which comes to about 36 billion, carte blanche said. I was looking at 26 billion in the book last year, up from an initial 8.9 billion in 2006. So, but that 26 billion that I'm quoting excluded capitalized interest, which is an accounting procedure Eskom likes to follow. So the 10 billion between the 26 and the 36 now being quoted might be the capitalized interest. But that's quite interesting. Also interesting, the 36 billion figure hasn't been denied by Eskom since Sunday. So that is quite newsworthy and alarming, I think.
What information did they miss that's in your book on Ingula?
I think there's a couple of nuggets that's interesting. For instance, the use of foreign laborers at Ingula. A whole lot of Chinese laborers were used by the contractors. That's very interesting, and one could argue alarming as well, given the country's need to grow local talent and to employ locally. So that's something that I expand on in the book. And there's another little tidbit that a quote actually by this relates to the accident that they spoke about. So in the piece on carte blanche, they mentioned an accident in 2013 where a few people lost their lives tragically, and that report on that accident has never been made public. So we don't know exactly what went wrong, but I kind of go into the book as well. But one of the issues mentioned was around the safety and the safety initiatives around the whole project, and how safety measures are sadly lacking. And so at the time, this was a while ago, Brian Damas, who was the Eskom CEO, and I quote him in the book, mentioned the following. He said he criticized the lack of safety standards employed by contractors, and he told Engineering News that he had appealed to engineering and construction firms to improve safety measures and adhere to mandated safety requirements. And this is a direct quote: "I have been personally disappointed by the lack of interest demonstrated by the heads of construction and engineering houses, many of whom don't pitch up at our yearly safety sessions." So that's quite a massive indictment and fits into the story that carte blanche was painting, the picture that the safety issues weren't adhered to.
So Auto has come out saying that there needs to be an independent inquiry into the whole of Eskom. Do you support this? What do you think?
I think it could be worthwhile. Maybe Ota actually read a little bit. I actually mentioned as well that we should consider a thoroughly independent audit of the entire Eskom business by a panel of independent experts, people that could look into the procurement practices, could look into the project management, because it's very clear that Eskom is massively bumbling along in their projects, and they are running the biggest projects in the country, and they're all massively over budget. Ingula, once again, as an example, up from 8.9 billion in 2006 to now 36 billion 10 years later. Also over time, massively time overruns. The same on Medupi and Kusile, which are probably hundreds, tens of billions over cost. So a thoroughly independent look at Eskom, look at continued political interference at some level or other. Isn't there the influence perhaps of influential families, which we won't name right now, on the company and the daily operations? Could be very useful to have such an exercise, because of the amounts we are talking about and the impact of Eskom on the country. I mean, we can't be without a properly run Eskom, and given our future plans and Eskom's drive to saying that we need nuclear basically at any cost, we need to be, as a public, be happy and confident in the company and the ability to continue operating.
When it comes to electricity prices, this actually really hits the average South African electricity user. What's happening in that space?
I mean, that's alarming. Electricity tariffs are skyrocketing, and I would make a hazard a guess and say they're going to keep skyrocketing. The fact of the matter is Eskom needs money, and it needs a lot of money. And it speaks to the other issues I've mentioned: project overruns, massive wage bill, incredible wage bill. On average, I think around 500,000 rand per year per employee. Huge wage bill, huge projects, cost overruns. So Eskom needs a lot of money. The moment we're seeing that there's a bit of an action between NERSA, the regulator, and Eskom, with the court interfering, saying that some of the previous tariff increases must be reconsidered. It will be interesting to see what comes out of that. My opinion is that it's going to be very difficult to reconsider those tariff applications. Eskom is already and has cried foul, even on those higher perhaps than it should have been tariff increases, saying that they're not going to have enough money to continue funding the CapEx program going forward. So we're going to be sitting with a situation where Eskom will say, well, if you want us to keep building, these are the costs, and to cover those costs, these must be the minimum tariffs.